Hi guys, Shawn here from digiDirect. Today we're going to be talking about the Panasonic Lumix TZ110 compact camera. Now right off the bat I want to clear up a little bit of confusion. This camera has a whole bunch of different names based on where in the world you are. Here in Australia it's called the TZ110, in Europe it's the TZ100, and in North America it's the ZS100. So if you hear any of those different names, we're all talking about the same camera here. So I'm going to go through all the specific details, but the main summary that we're gonna find about the TZ110 is that it's a very good, small, compact travel camera with a very large sensor that takes very high quality photos with a long zoom range for the size of the sensor, a viewfinder, 4K video, some 4K photo options, and it's at a price point that is significantly cheaper than its closest competitors within this kind of market category, namely the Sony RX100, which is kind of the king of these 1-inch sensor cameras, which we'll get to in a sec. So I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons between the TZ110 and the RX100, try to show you what the differences might be, why you might want to go for one or the other. Okay. So let's talk about the features. I've mentioned the sensor size. That's the main thing about this camera and what differentiates it from most other compacts. So the TZ110 has a 1-inch size sensor inside of it. That's very large for a camera of this size. You can see it's not physically much larger than most compacts, but that 1-inch sensor is about 4 times the size of the sensor that we see in most compact cameras. So that means you'll have much higher overall image quality, much better low light performance, a bit of a better shallow depth of field. So that's the blurry out of focus background that most people like because it gives a nice artistic look. All of that is going to be much better in this camera compared to your standard compact from whatever manufacturer you might be looking at. Now there are a number of other cameras, a couple of other cameras that have this size sensor in this kind of form factor. I mentioned the RX100, that's the main one. The Canon G5X is another one, but this is what separates the TZ110 from most other compact cameras, is the high quality that you're going to see from the photos. It's also a 20 megapixel sensor, so fairly high resolution. You'll be able to blow the photos up to a pretty good size. Now I mentioned that this puts it in the same category as the RX100. What are a couple things that might differentiate the TZ110 from the RX100? Well, first of all, the TZ110 is priced significantly cheaper than the current RX100 Mark IV. Besides from pricing though, feature-wise, the TZ110 has a 10 times zoom on it, which is a much longer zoom than any other camera in this category has. For example, the RX100 has just a bit less than a 3 times zoom on it. So in terms of 35 millimeter equivalent, the TZ110 has a 25 to 250 millimeter zoom. The RX100 has a 24 to 70 millimeter equivalent zoom. So way longer zoom on the TZ110 than on the RX100 and other comparable cameras. Now that means the TZ110 is very versatile, can be used in a lot of different situations, you know, nature, wildlife, sports, situations where you can't necessarily be right front and center as close as you want to be to the subject. This is going to be your only way in this camera class to get that. So that's a huge feature on the TZ110 and a really big bonus. Now one thing that I will mention is you do trade off a little bit to get that zoom. As a result, the lens itself is not quite as bright as the aperture itself is not quite as bright on the lens as it is on like the RX100. So you trade off a little bit of the low light performance and shallow depth of field for the longer zoom. So you're gonna have to weigh up what's more important to you there. Okay, so let's take a look at the physical body here. You see a lot of smooth surfaces, straight lines, very cool construction. Definitely looks a little bit reminiscent of a Leica camera almost, and indeed the lens is designed by Leica, as many Panasonic cameras are. It also reminds me a little bit of the LX100, another popular Lumix camera. Overall very stylish. I've got the black one here. You can also get it in silver. Now looking at the top of the camera, we can see the pop-up flash here. We see the general mode control dial that we're used to seeing. Zoom controls, shutter release, the movie button, and we've also got this control dial on the back here for your thumb. So that means you've got some manual controls over your shutter speed and so on. I should also mention that at the front, The ring around the lens is also a control dial. So if you're in full manual mode, the back dial will control, you can set it to control shutter speed, the front dial will control aperture. So you don't need to menu dive to change these settings. You can use it in full manual and have full physical controls over those settings, which is very nice in a camera of this size. Looking at the back here, we see most of the buttons we're used to seeing on these types of cameras. We do have a number of customizable function buttons, which is great. Panasonic always makes a point to include a lot of function buttons that you can be assigned to whatever you want. We've got the screen at the back. Now I'll note this screen is not articulating, it doesn't flip out, but it is a touch screen, which the RX100 is not. We also have a viewfinder at the top left. Now some people prefer shooting with a viewfinder like myself, but even if you don't generally use a viewfinder, it's definitely useful to have if you're out in the daytime and there's bright sun, a lot of glare on the screen. You'll definitely find a viewfinder useful. It's got a number of internal features: Wi-Fi, focus peaking, panorama mode, image stabilization, and so on. But some of the most interesting under the hood features is the 4K video. So like many other Lumix cameras, Panasonic has implemented 4K video onto the TZ110. It's the first time we've seen it on a camera of this kind of size and sensor sizing and so on. So that's great. It'll shoot 4K video at 30 frames per second, which is decently high. Now it also allows us to have access to a number of 4K photo modes. I'm going to touch on these in a sec, but Panasonic has been doing a really good job with a number of their cameras in utilizing the 4K video function to also give benefits to still photos, and we'll touch on how they do that in just a moment. But those do make its way into the TZ110. Okay, so let's touch on the 4K photo modes here quickly. To do that, I'll give a brief explanation of how video actually works. So when we're taking video, I mentioned it does 4K video at 30 frames per second. That means it's just taking 30 still pictures within 1 second and playing that back to us. That's how we see video. It's just a number of still photos played back very fast. So all these 4K photo modes, which we'll get into, they rely on that underlying idea that video is just a series of still images. So most of them rely on pulling a single frame from this video and using that as the photo. So you may wonder, why is this the first time we're hearing about this kind of stuff? Why couldn't I do that with 1080p full HD video? Well, you could, but the thing is, video is much lower resolution than photos. So if you take a still from a 1080p full HD video, that's going to be equivalent to about a 2 megapixel photo. So not very high. However, 4K video is so much higher resolution that a still pulled from a 4K video is equivalent to about an 8 megapixel photo. So still not as high as a full resolution photo, but 8 megapixels is at the point where it's still certainly usable. If you're showing it on the web or your computer or tablet or so on, it's going to look excellent. When you're printing it out, you're still going to be able to blow it up to about an A3, A4 size. For my North American friends, that's about 8.5 by 11. So some decent usage. Certainly in most cases, 8 megapixel photo will be fine for what you need, considering what it lets you do, and we'll go into that now. So the two main 4K photo modes are 4K burst and post focus. 4K burst is essentially, the camera is actually just taking straight up 4K video, but once you're done taking the video, which by the way you can take for up to 15 minutes, so essentially you can shoot at 30 frames per second for up to 15 minutes is essentially what that boils down to. It then allows you to flip through on the touchscreen and choose which specific frame you want to use as the photo. So this is great for anything with fast motion. You've got some kind of action, kids running around, sports, nature, any of that kind of stuff. Take the 4K burst, and then later you can pick through and pull out the specific frame that you want to use as your photo. So that's very, very handy to have. The other mode is post focus. And essentially what this does is it actually takes 49 photos, so you're talking about 1.5 seconds if we're shooting at 30 frames per second. The reason it takes 49 photos is because there are 49 focus points covering the screen on the TZ110. So as it takes these photos, each photo uses the next focus point, a different focus point. So basically, it then gives you a file of all of these combined together, and you can use the touch screen to choose which focus point you want. So if you've got something in the foreground and something in the background, they're not necessarily both going to be in focus. You can shoot with the post focus mode. You can then later choose, okay, I want to have the foreground subject in focus, or maybe I change my mind, I want to have the background subject in focus. If you're shooting group photos of people, you can choose maybe which face you want to have in focus. So a lot of flexibility after the fact. Now, normally in a regular photo, whatever's in focus is in focus, and whatever isn't. So you can't go back and change that. So this is a way that Panasonic kind of gets around that by taking a photo for each focus point, but again, utilizing their 4K video functionality. So that's really, really cool as well. So there you have it. That's the TZ110 in a nutshell. A small, compact travel camera with a very large sensor, takes very high quality photos. It's got a very long 10 times zoom in it to make it very versatile. Has 4K video and a number of 4K photo modes. It's got a touch screen, a viewfinder, and it's priced significantly cheaper than the biggest competitor in this market category, the Sony RX100. So if you are looking for a small, compact travel camera with high quality images, I would definitely recommend taking a look at the Panasonic TZ110. If you want to learn a bit more about it or try it out, come into one of our stores. We have stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Brisbane CBD, and the Melbourne CBD. You can also get the TZ110 on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Take care, guys.